Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Business of Art podcast for this next episode. Today, we have with us Dave Santillanes, the legend himself. Glad to have you here, Dave.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for being with us. And so I'm just going to read his bio real quick, and then we're going to jump into his journey. So, Dave Santillanes was born and raised in northern Colorado at the base of the Rocky Mountains, where hunting, hiking, and backpacking fostered an early love for the wilderness. Coupled with an interest in art, Dave was doing pencil drawings of wildlife, Western subjects, and even landscapes at a young age, subjects he still paints today. In 1995, Dave received his BFA in graphic design and a minor in history from Colorado State University. Shortly afterwards, he traded pencil and paper for a brush and canvas and began painting as often as he could while working full-time as a wildland firefighter and later as a digital imaging technician. It was during this time that Dave discovered the benefits and rewards of outdoor painting, where direct observation allowed for a more precise rendering of color, light, and atmosphere. Studying the physical aspects of nature isn't the only reason Dave began painting outdoors. The sensory experience of being there is equally important. As he puts it, there's no better way to really get to know a place than to sit for a couple of hours and contemplate it while painting. This intense observation brings a spiritual intimacy with the scene that can't be achieved in mere passing and allows him to speak with complete sincerity in each painting. It took Dave 12 years of dedicated painting before he was able to go full-time as an artist, and within a few years, he has gained some international acclaim for his atmospheric landscapes. The landscape continues to be central to Dave's work, but he increasingly depicts Western subjects and wildlife within those scenes, coming full circle back to those early inspirations. In 2023, this led to his induction into the prestigious Cowboy Artists of America and an opportunity to follow in the footsteps of his earliest art heroes like James Reynolds and Howard Turpning. Dave is also a member of the Plein Painters of America and the Oil Painters of America. Along with his induction into the CAA, Dave's passion for painting has led to a number of prestigious awards, including the Henry Farney Award for Best Painting at the 2022 Quest for the West show in Indianapolis, the Top Landscape at the 12th Annual International ARC Salon, and the Grand Prize overall at the 9th Annual Plein Air Salon. He's also been featured in Art of the West, Plein Air Magazine, and Southwest Art Magazine. Dave currently lives in Wellington, Colorado with his wife, Heather, who's also an artist, and their daughter, Callie. All right, Dave. It's a pretty awesome resume you've got there.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for being here. And let's dive right in. We would love to hear your story. We want to, from early on, we kind of got a little bit of a taste from that from your bio. But what are some of those early experiences that led you into art, and how did you get from there to here?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me, Mark. Appreciate being here. It's been fun watching your journey too.
Thank you.
I always loved to draw. So even as a young kid, I was drawing all the time, and I always thought this would be something I'd love to do. And my parents were really supportive of that. But by the time I got to college, I was trying to figure out what direction could I take it to actually make a living. The idea of making a living as an artist who could paint whatever they wanted didn't really occur to me at that time. But right before I went into college, I figured that was going to be my path. I'm going to try and make it as an artist. So I went to college with the idea that I'm going to be a fine art major.
Yeah.
And very quickly I realized it was not for me. They were teaching abstract expressionism, and which is fine if that's what you want to do, but I wanted to learn how to paint like the artists I was following at the time.
Yeah.
Meaning realistic Western scenes and wildlife and landscapes. So I ended up getting out of art. I started in, and I was taking some studio courses, building the beginning of that. And that's kind of when I learned it really wasn't going to be for me. And so I decided, even it was probably 2 years in, that it was time for me to switch majors. And so I went into another love of mine, history. So I started studying history of the Southwest in the United States. And then I realized I'm probably no more marketable as a history major than I was as an artist. So I thought, I need to, first of all, get out of college. And so I figured the fastest way for me to get a degree was to switch back to art and focus on a concentration like illustration or graphic design. So I ended up in graphic design, got my degree, and the graphic design was great because it allowed me to take illustration courses and life drawing and things that were relevant to me that I could see using. And I also started pushing paint around a little bit.
Nice.
It was the first time I'd really painted. Up till then, it was all drawing. And, painting it's a completely different language.
Right.
They're both beautiful languages, but I think, they're so different.
Yeah.
So to start pushing paint around a little bit, really inspired me. And all of my art heroes at the time were painters. So I thought eventually I'm going to end up trying to do what they do. So I started painting a little bit. And when I graduated, I set up in whatever room was available in whatever house I was living in and started painting a bit. At that time, I obviously was nowhere near being able to make it a living as an artist. I had maybe right after college, I'd taken a little bit of gap time just working, and I was painting as often as I could, and I had maybe 3 paintings to my name, and I thought they were great. And I thought, okay, I've got 3 paintings. I'm going to go see if I can get into these mountain galleries in Colorado. These really nice mountain galleries that I'm sure just love being approached by a young kid.
With 3 paintings.
With 3 paintings. But that's how, I had no idea how things worked. I was just trying to figure it out. So I drive my car up to the mountains and 3 paintings in the back of it. And, the doors couldn't have shut quicker for me. And rightfully so. And I learned even back then that, there's no cutting corners. It is, it's a process. And, it was a humbling lesson, but a worthwhile lesson that I had to have way more than 3 paintings, and a name associated with those paintings would also be good. So I came back home with my tail between my legs, and it motivated me more than anything. It motivated me to paint more and get better.
That's awesome.
It could have gone either way. It could have demoralized me, but I was pretty hard-headed at that time, and I wanted to figure it out. So I painted any chance I could get. It was tough finding a graphic design job, so I really wasn't able to put my degree to use. So I did odd jobs, like I took one season and I worked up on the mountain in Steamboat Springs, Colorado, worked as a lift operator up there. And the funny thing is, that was kind of I lived in employee housing, and in employee housing, they had there were maybe, 4 foot, maybe not even that wide, maybe 3 foot by 8 foot storage lockers.
Okay.
For skis mainly. And I thought, it's just wide enough for me to walk in, walls on both sides. And I thought I could make a studio out of this, just my one hand.
That's awesome.
And and so I did that because no one was using the ski locker. Employee housing, we had, there were 4 people in a 2-bedroom apartment. There was obviously no place to paint in these little employee housing units. But there was a place in the ski locker. So I thought I could make this work. Not even considering it's minus 15 degrees out there when I'm painting, but I was that motivated. I wanted to paint. So
that's impressive.
So I did. I painted in the ski locker on my days off, and got another job on my days off, just framing picture framing. There's a picture framer in town, and
nice.
So everything I did was kind of geared towards what I wanted to do. So that's what I did. Odd jobs for a while. I was a wildland firefighter for a while.
How long did you do that?
I did that for about 4 years.
Okay.
4 years.
That's pretty intense work.
It is. It's very intense, and but it allows me to time off for painting and doing things like that too.
Yeah.
So those were great, and a lot of material came from those times.
Okay.
Really a fun job, hard work, but very fun. And then it wasn't until after that I really started, I started painting outdoors after that, and that changed everything for me. Painting outdoors was the missing thing. I was painting mostly from photographs at that time, and just not making very good paintings. Then I started painting outdoors, and it changed everything. It fed my studio work, and then my studio work would feed plein air painting, and the circular progression of learning how to paint happened. And I think that was about early 2000s. And then I kept doing that. I'd do plein air events. I got a steady job as a digital imaging manager at a professional photo lab. So in Fort Collins, there's a professional photo lab, and I was doing the digital imaging. And what was great about this is it put me in contact with all of these great artists. Skip Whitcomb was a regular user of the lab because he'd bring his paintings in, we'd photograph them, I'd color correct them and save them to CD for him.
Wow.
Richard Schmid was in the area. He would bring his paintings in to photograph, and sometimes he'd bring in slides from all of his years of work, and we'd scan those, and ultimately we did the color work for his Alla Prima book. So I had this huge connection with all of these artists whose work I admired. So it was fun to dive in. I was spoiled. I could zoom right in like you do at the art museums where you stick your face right up close. Well, I could just do that with the computer.
Yeah.
Zoom right in to see his brush work and zoom out. And it was really a great job to have while I was trying to do my own thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I worked that for 12 years before I was able to really make a go as a full-time artist. Cultivating my career, painting at plein air events, doing my days off from the lab would be spent at plein air events painting. Then I go back to work when I got home. So
what as far as like the time, in a typical week, what was that looking like for you?
Well, a typical week when I was at the lab is I'd work maybe 8 to 5 or 6. I'd get home, take a break, and then I'd paint from maybe 8 to sometimes 2 a.m. and then get back up, go to work, do it again. And then on my weeks off, and they were so great. They'd work with me. They knew my passion was painting, and if I needed time off for a plein air event, they were happy to let me do that.
That's awesome.
So, yeah, it was really a great job to have while I was building my name recognition and painting skills.
So what year did you go full time?
It was 2012.
Okay.
Yeah, 2012.
Okay.
So I've been about 12 years now.
So yeah, from then till now, what's it been like?
Well, it's been great. That day that I quit and went full time, I still look back on my calendar and it just says freedom, because that's what it felt like, just freedom. That was my initial response. But then you work harder when there's that pressure of that's your only way, that's your only living right now. So, it can lead to, 14-hour days of painting, where you just get going. And I think, that's where it's, where I'm at now is always trying to find that balance of producing and working hard, but also carving out free time.
Yeah.
Where my brain isn't engaged in painting, where it's engaged in family. So those are, that's kind of where I'm at now.
Yeah.
But, but it's been great. Since going full time, it's been great. Things have happened that, you don't anticipate. I met my wife, a couple years after I went full time. It's amazing what just doing what you love opens up so many doors.
Yeah, that's incredible. So how has your work changed? Because when you were, still working with other jobs, you didn't have the ability to work 100% on your art. So how has your work changed since you went full time?
Well, I think it's gotten better just for the fact that you're devoting a full day to painting rather than chopping that up, because, I don't know if I'm different than most artists. I have to learn the same thing about 10 times before it sticks.
Yeah.
So I'll make the same mistake over and over. And this just consolidated that to where I could really, I could make the same mistake, but it's happening quickly enough to where I'm catching it at that point. Yeah. So you just learn faster and things, things click faster. And I was able to do things like, market better because I had more time. So you're devoting all of your resources to this effort rather than dividing them up. So it was huge. I've heard artists say you have to paint every day to really see progression. And I think that's true. I always felt like I was painting full time anyway. Just I had 2 full-time jobs, my regular job that actually paid me, and then my other job that it didn't pay me.
Yeah.
So, but it's different when you have all this time, because painting could really engage your brain even when you're not doing it. So it's a all-encompassing thing, almost 24/7.
Yeah,
of our lives as artists.
Yeah, I would agree with that wholeheartedly. When you jumped into full time, what kind of revenue did you have? Work in galleries? Were you already in shows at that point? Where was your money coming from?
Yeah, at that time, I had gained a couple galleries from the plein air circuit. So I was doing the plein air events, and it opened the doors for some galleries. And I can't stress enough how much the plein air circuit impacted my career, because you're painting maybe 5 paintings a day outdoors, just trying to produce enough for the show at the end of the week. And, maybe at that time, 1 out of 5 was a decent painting, and the rest were kind of, euphemistically, I call them nice studies.
Yeah.
but not frameable. So I was painting so much, and that led to me getting better, but then it opened doors to some galleries, and it reminded me of when I just tried to bust down the door with 3 paintings before kind of earning that right. And I think that when artists discovered my work because it was getting better, it just felt right.
Yeah.
So I got into a couple of galleries. So I was selling my work at galleries, but also doing the plein air events, and then teaching a little bit at that time. So those 3 things were, I wasn't living high on the hog by any stretch, but I was making it, and I was single at the time.
Yeah.
So it was just me. I just had to, pay rent, buy food was basically my needs. So, and pay bills, of course.
Right.
But I was making it, and I was free, and I could see the potential of where I was going.
Yeah. That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that. How supportive was your family, growing up? Like, you talked about you did a lot outdoors, but how do you feel like your parents and family played a role in kind of promoting and nurturing that desire in you?
Yeah, they were very supportive. My dad's very artistic himself. Now, he's not an artist in the form of a painter or he draws, but he taught himself how to make arrowheads and just doing things like that was always part of his gig. He'd go from one craft and artistic endeavor to another. So, but he loved my work even from a young age and was always, very supportive of that. My mom was the same way, just very supportive. And I think that's helpful because it makes you believe that it's possible what I want to do.
Yeah.
And I think that's a hard thing for young artists is to, I have many artists who take my workshops now who have already had their career because it was something their parents pushed them to do, was this career, so that they could make a living. And then they come back later and say, this is what I really wanted to do was paint. And now I get to do that because I'm retired and I have time now. And I was very fortunate that I was pushed to pursue what made me happy rather than what made financial sense. Because I don't think any parent in their right mind would push someone to be an artist based on financial sense, because it doesn't always really make sense. But but it works if you're passionate, I think, about what you do. And if you're passionate about what you do, you're gonna make it work. So I think there's 2 sides to that story.
Yeah. Something that I've thought a lot about as I've been trying to create content for, aspiring and emerging artists is the idea that it's so important that we identify as an artist. And I remember when I was in high school, that's kind of when I decided that I was an artist. And I had, just in my art classes at a regular public high school, I was getting lots of really great recognition. And to me, it was like, I'm an artist. And that's, people said, hey, Mark's a great artist, and that was kind of my identity. And so I think with having that being a part of who I was, it helped me to push through the difficulty and the challenges of the struggle.
Yep. It gives you an identity too. Like, that is who I am.
Yeah.
And sometimes that happens, and for this reason or that reason, a person gets sidetracked and gets away from their identity of who they are and what they're good at. I had a fantastic high school art teacher, and he promoted the idea that find out what you do well and do it for all you're worth, because that's gonna really lead to happiness. And it was a big thing. I still remember that to this day, him pushing that idea of find out what you do well and just do it for all your work.
Yeah, that's awesome. You know, I'm assuming that a lot of people listening are going to be in a similar boat, kind of like what you talked about, whether they've pursued another career or they don't see art being a financially something that they can rely on at this point. And what are some tips or even suggestions you might give to those folks who find themselves in that situation where it's not feasible financially to just jump into art 100%?
Yeah, and there's different levels of that. I understand. Once you have a family, it changes the game because you're not. It's not just you. It's a family you're providing for, and that changes the dynamics of everything. But I would have given myself this advice early: is embrace the journey, and don't think that there's any way to be an overnight success with this, that it is a long journey and you have to develop something while you're developing your career. So you're developing everything at once. My best advice is if you have to work, make sure it's not a soul crushing job. Make sure it's something that doesn't make you, doesn't make you depressed, because it could be it could be 12 years. I mean, I'm not saying it takes that long for everyone. I've had friends go full time early, much earlier than that. And we were doing the same thing, same style of stuff. But they had their ducks in a row better than I did. It took me 12 years. And, part of that is I wanted it to be a natural transition. I didn't want to force things. I'm not the best marketer of my work, so I wanted the momentum to be carrying itself by the time I quit my day job. Yeah. And so that's what I did. But my day job was a good day job. It kept me motivated and kept me, doing very artistic things, just in a different environment. I've had, some artists have to work jobs that aren't that fun. And if you're really, I think if your goal is really to be a professional artist, it almost doesn't matter what that other job is, as long as it pays the bills and doesn't crush your spirit.
Yeah.
That's what, that's my best advice, is if you have to work, make sure it's not, maybe an outdoor job, or if you're an outdoor person,
Yeah.
I hear stories of many outdoor people who end up with these cubicle jobs, and it just, crushes them. So
yeah. So my journey, to be really brief, I was an art teacher at Cody High School for 8 years, and for being indoors, it was one of the best jobs I think anybody could have.
Yeah. Yep.
And it left me with excitement and energy. I was when I got home, I was excited to get to work, because I was teaching other kids how to work all day, and it's like, now I get to go home and actually do some myself.
That's awesome.
And
how long did you do that?
That was 8 years of teaching. Yeah.
Yep. That's great. That's seems fairly consistent with, how long it takes just to get your name out there.
Yeah.
Because you may be doing great work from the beginning, but no one knows you're doing that until you start getting it out there.
Yep.
No, that's
and yeah, it was pretty neat how that all played out. And it was nice too, like you were saying with yours, where it was a very gradual but natural kind of a growth into that. And I think the nice thing about having that money, where I wasn't relying on the art income specifically, it allowed me to grow and develop in my painting in a very natural way that I wanted to grow.
That's the thing, is if it does happen naturally, you're not, you don't have to pick up commissions that you would never pick up, because that can, when you want to paint your own thing and you're picking up commissions that aren't necessarily your style or what you want to paint just because you're the artist, that can be a little bit soul crushing, right? So it's good to not have to do that. If you never have to do a commission, that isn't in line with what you do, that's a good thing, I think.
Yeah. So let's kind of switch gears here and go a little bit into your creative process. Like, let's get some more details. I know it sounds like you start a lot with like a plein air study.
Yeah.
And where does it go from there?
It used to be 100%. It was a plein air study that inspired me, and I was going to rebuild that painting in the studio. So my plein air paintings, I still consider studies, and a lot of the idea comes from sitting there for an hour, or 2 hours, as it sometimes is. But you sit there in the middle of the forest painting, and you really get to know that place, as I mentioned in the bio. And sometimes that dictates the story that you want to tell in the studio. So that'll inspire a studio piece. Now, these days I don't get outside to paint as much. So a lot of my inspiration comes from past experiences outdoors.
Yeah.
And it's in a large part, it's from photos now. But it still has context in painting outdoors. And so I'll take that plein air study or the photo, and I'll develop an idea in the studio, a small study, maybe a 12 by 20, a study around that size, and I'll work out color and design and all of those things to try and, restate the story or develop the idea a little bit further. And then from there, I'll go big if it demands that. I'm working on some 40 by 70 pieces around that size now.
Wow.
And they all come from smaller studies. So I don't paint big outdoors. Maybe 12 by 16 is my go-to size outdoors.
Okay.
And then I'll take those and develop another similar size study in the studio. And then I'll go big if it requires that or demands that.
So, just to clarify, so you'll do, let's say, a 12 by 16 in person. You're probably looking for values, color notes, those kind of relationships to each other.
Yeah.
Then in the studio, you do a similar sized piece. Would you do it over the top of that, or as a totally separate piece?
A totally separate piece. So I don't really like to paint on top of the plein air studies, okay, whether they're good or bad. There's a lot of information in a bad plein air painting.
Yeah.
A lot of good information in a bad plein air painting. So I'll take that good information and kind of develop that. And if I have photos, it's gotten to the point where photos are a little more difficult to work with than plein air paintings and a photo, because you don't have that reference. And photos, it's really hard to analyze color from them.
Yeah.
So that's where the studio study comes in, is I'm trying to redevelop those colors in more of a plein air sense. And,
but you're looking at some photographs at that point, but using the colors from your study.
Plein air study. Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, that's makes
ideal.
Sense. Yeah.
That's ideal. And if I don't have a plein air study, you can still do it. You can kind of think your way through some of the pitfalls of the photo.
Yeah.
And develop sort of a plein air study from those photos. But or at least it'll help color wise to do that.
Yeah.
And then I have kind of a roadmap for a bigger painting, so it allows me to paint freely on the big one rather than try to figure out these color issues. To figure out those color issues on a 40 by 70 could take years, because
no thank you.
Yeah, if you have a 30-inch area to change over and over and over, it can be really difficult. So I do all that small and then go large.
That makes a lot of sense. Solve the problems in a smaller scale, save yourself time, energy, and then That makes
And
sense.
it doesn't mean there's not going to be problems on the big one to manage your way through, but at least you've done your due diligence and caught as many problems as you can small.
Yeah.
Ideal.
What are some of the problems you feel like you run into going from that smaller study into a big piece? What are some of the challenges of going bigger that you run into?
I think the biggest one is maintain that freshness. There's a look to plein air paintings that is very difficult to capture large. There's a freshness, a brevity, which, for me, I love the brief statement. Briefer the better. But when you have a 40 by 70 canvas, it's hard to be brief and still be satisfied with it. So I tend to walk that line of too much and not enough. And finding that line is really difficult in a big painting, because I want it to still look plein airish in a way.
Yeah. So not overworked, basically.
Not overworked. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you, let's say like in a scenario, you've overworked an area, do you ever scrape it off and redo it and bring that brevity to it again?
Quite a bit. Yeah. That happens all the time where if something's not reading right, because once you cross that line of too much, you have to go all the way. And if you don't, you have to bring it back. So it presents itself fairly obviously because an area just won't look right. And it's because I crossed over that line but didn't go all the way to hyper-realism. And so it looks like it doesn't belong in that world. And so getting everything to work in that way where you haven't crossed the line and you haven't fallen short of the line that can be difficult anywhere, but on a big painting especially so.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the big thing. Everything else I love about it. It's more fun to paint big for me. It's just not feasible outdoors.
Yeah.
Where I like to go. Carrying a giant canvas 8 miles into the backcountry is not, especially here where you're going to probably encounter wind and then you have a kite that you're carrying.
Yeah. And
canvas.
Yeah. You're going kite sailing and not hiking.
Yep. No. But
yeah, I totally get it. Thank you for that. And can you tell us about, what's your typical surface that you're working on? What are your tools?
I paint on a very smooth surface. When I first started outdoor painting, I started with rough surface and I was always fighting that rough canvas. And so I started going to smoother and smoother and more expensive canvas. And I wasn't really painting well outdoors. I was learning a lot, but it was, I didn't want to learn how to paint on Clausen's 13 double oil primed canvas because it's so expensive.
Yeah.
So I was looking for alternatives, and some artists at the time that I knew were painting on Kills and MDF. And I went to the art store looking for Kills, and they had Bin, which is a competitor. So I started painting with Bin. It's a primer sealer that you can get at Home Depot. The first time I used it, I got it from Jerry's Artorama.
Okay.
And I don't think they sell it anymore, but you can get it at Home Depot. So I was using that, and early on, and I was doing all kinds of research about it. Is this going to be a good surface? When I first painted on it, I hated it because it was so smooth, so slick. I couldn't get the paint to stay on, and it was because I was using bristle brushes instead of softer brushes. So then I switched to softer brushes, and I loved it. And I loved everything about it. It allowed me to be really fine, to not paint thick paint, but still get real painterly strokes.
Yeah.
And the paint just sits on it, but it's absorbent enough that you can layer paint as well. So it was, gesso to me was so absorbent that the brush is kind of drug across it. It sucked the life out of the oil. And I'm speaking of acrylic gesso. And so I wanted something that would allow the paint to move more buttery and just get that. So this was a great surface. The problem early is I was getting some areas because of I'm assuming because of the MDF, some areas that would just dry dead. So I'd get all this glossy paint and then all of a sudden a dead spot. And these were on my plein air paintings. So it took me a while to figure out that, and I had read that the acidic glues of the MDF can leach up into the oil paint if you don't put a barrier down. So I started using an acid-free glue barrier with the bin on top and, have never seen anything like that since. So it's been a great surface, but that's what I use: MDF, bin primer, sealer, and Lineco acid-free glue underneath. And it's been a great surface. And I use softer brushes, so I'm using the Rosemary's Eclipse brushes. They're a softer, and I use Silver White, which is a softer white synthetic brush.
Okay.
A couple of synthetic brushes. And then I use mostly Rembrandt paint. Occasionally there's a few colors that aren't Rembrandt that I think are like Grumbacher and Sennelier, a few other brands, but mostly Rembrandt.
Okay.
Like the consistency of it.
Yeah. What's your palette like? Do you have a pretty limited palette? What kind of colors? Not really. I use the primary color scheme, but it's I do a warm and cool of all the primaries. Okay.
Or a brilliant and gray of all the primaries. So I have cad yellow, yellow ochre, cad orange. So I have a few cheater colors like cad orange, cad red, alizarin crimson, transparent red oxide, my one earth color. And then I use, that TRO, alizarin crimson, viridian, another cheater color. And then a warm blue, which could be cerulean blue or cobalt or just a warmer blue, and then ultramarine blue. Okay. So it's the primaries is basically yellows, reds, and blues, but a few cheater colors in between. And then I use cold gray, which is my, I need big giant tubes of cold gray because I go through it, a lot. So cold gray is a staple. It'd be hard for me to do a painting without cold gray and titanium white. Those would be my two colors that I need. But
gallons of.
Yeah, gallons of. They sold it, or subscribe and save with Amazon would be great if they just delivered it every other day to my door.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I totally get it. So that cold gray, I'm not familiar with that.
It's a neutral. It's basically a neutral gray. It's called cold gray because it probably shifts slightly cool on the gray spectrum, but it really is flexible because it's sort of in the middle of the value scale and pretty neutral as far as temperature. And the way I use it is as a chroma killer. So for those distant blues on the mountains, those distant colors, I'll use gray to mute that chroma so that the chroma can really speak loudly in the foreground.
Yeah.
And there's other ways I use it, but that's really the main way is to mute that chroma.
Yeah.
You can mute chroma, but still allow some of that chroma to work. Because someone asked once, well, to mute blue, why don't you just add the complement orange to it? And there's a subtle difference where that'll crush color completely, and I just want to mute it.
Yeah.
And so if you add gray to it, you're just muting it. If you add orange to it, you're crushing it.
Yeah.
Subtle difference, but allows that atmosphere to really play out.
Well, and you're also going to warm it up with orange too, and you get that temperature shift that you don't want with that atmosphere. If anybody's familiar with your work, and we can see this really beautiful painting behind you that you're working on. It looks like it's in progress.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you have this really wonderful atmosphere. And I don't think I've seen a painting of yours that doesn't have beautiful atmosphere in it.
Oh, thanks.
I'm sure we haven't seen all your paintings though.
Yeah, there's a few early on that have no atmosphere. Yeah, that was something that outdoor painting definitely taught me.
Yeah. So, if somebody wanted to, I think plein air obviously is a great way to develop that and to see it in life. But maybe, give us some tips and tricks on how to create some kind of atmosphere like that in our work, especially if maybe we can't get out as much as we would like to.
Yeah. Well, that's the big trick. I mean, the cold gray is really the secret. For my work, it's not a panacea where it just works. You just throw cold gray on your on your painting and it falls into atmosphere. But
right.
But thinking about it in terms of, and I always say when I go out and paint, and if all you have time for when you're outdoor painting is to paint shadows, because those are they control so much, and they're the hardest thing for a camera to replicate, which is why sometimes photographs don't feel like atmosphere, like you can reach into them like a painting. A well-painted plein air painting, you can almost feel like you can reach your hand right into this canvas. But it all happens in the shadows. So the shadows to me are key. If you can compare all that shadow information through an entire landscape, you're going to get atmosphere. It's no guarantee you'll get a great painting, but you'll at least get atmosphere.
Okay.
And part of the things that happen consistently with shadows as they go back is they get cooler and less chroma. So slightly gray or slightly cooler as they go back. And to lay that in is going to set the entire structure for your landscape. So to get those key elements in, you're going to, that's going to be the framework. And then you add the light information on top of those shadows, and you should have an atmospheric painting at that point. But study shadows. That would be my biggest bit of advice, is go outside and study shadows and try and break down the landscape into shadow family and light family.
Okay.
Because that's going to simplify your approach and simplify your way of looking at a landscape. And, my other thing with painting outdoors is try to find, at least initially, paint as much backlit as you can, because that flattens out all of those shadows, eliminates a lot of detail to where you're seeing those shadows progress from background to foreground.
So you're saying have the light from your back or
no,
the opposite?
Backlit scenes. So the light will be coming at you. So you have to deal with that uncomfortable part of it.
Yeah.
But if you can deal with that and look into the landscape as it's backlit, it's going to create big shadow shapes for you. And then you're just comparing shapes from background to foreground. And so it gives you a really nice way to study that aspect of landscape painting. Study those shadows going back.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's a good way to really speed up that learning curve.
Well, that's super helpful.
The other thing I would say is go to the Grand Canyon. That's kind of where I learned atmosphere, because miles of atmosphere just laid out for you.
Yeah.
Paint backlit scenes in the Grand Canyon, and you'll be leaps ahead of everyone.
That's really cool. Yeah, get yourself in front of a big enough, vast openness where you can really, really see that. And if it's even smoky outside, that's even better, right?
It is. And you'll learn that it's a slightly different color when it's smoke versus water. maybe.
Yeah.
But you get to that point, and that's a good place to be when you're making those subtle adjustments.
Yeah. So you said that you're not the best marketer of your work, but what do you personally do, or what are you doing or trying to do to market yourself, to get your work in front of buyers, that whole aspect of your career?
Yeah, and I can't, I can't understate the importance of social media these days. I mean, it's been really big in getting my name out there. But I think even going before that, to back up, the work is really the main thing. So, my advice I'd give to people just trying to make it as an artist is focus on the work. Because the work, you can, there's this idea, and my idea is always, and I steal this from Steve Martin, the actor. He said this once, that his idea when he was first starting out was to be so damn good they can't ignore you. And I think there's what that does is it puts the idea of what you can control where it needs to be. You can control the paintings and the artwork. You can control that aspect and get better. And then the marketing will hopefully take over, and the momentum will feed itself. But within that, if you do have something worth marketing, then it's much easier to market on Facebook or buying an ad in a magazine, because people will not only see the ad, but they'll see the painting and they'll say, "Oh, that's a great painting." So I always think, if you're having trouble marketing, it's always a good, safe thing to go back to what you can control, and that's the work itself.
Yeah. So
that's really, but social media is big, and I think getting into shows, the plein air circuit was a great marketer for my work locally with galleries, because all the galleries that I've gotten into have happened organically now. Since that first, doors in the face situation when I first started out, all the galleries I've had since have happened organically because they've seen my work either at plein air events or now at bigger shows, and they'll approach me that way. And I think it's a good feeling, because if a gallery sees your work and wants to represent you, that means they love your work, and they're going to try to put it in front of buyers for you.
Yeah,
so that's the ultimate. But shows are great, and then national shows from there. So plein air circuit to more national plein air shows to plein air studio shows and museum shows. Right now I do, I was doing Buffalo Bill. I'm not doing that one anymore. I was doing Buffalo Bill, Quest for the West, and now I'm doing Cowboy Artists of America.
Yeah.
So a couple of major national shows.
Yeah.
And that's another place to gain collectors and meet with collectors, and my work is in front of those collectors now.
Yeah. So when you meet collectors at events or these shows, museum shows, things like that, how do you foster relationships with them? Do you have like an email list? What kind of things do you do there?
Yeah, it used to be that, some shows and galleries years ago would never share buyer information with the artists. And I think that's changed a lot now, so that because there is, I think, a personal relationships that happens with artists and their buyers. And I think to not allow that to happen, affects sales ultimately, even for galleries that used to practice that.
Yeah.
So I think galleries are more open to allowing that sharing of information, but it doesn't always happen. But since those changes have occurred, I try to keep a better list of collectors purchasing my work and things like that. So yeah, I think that's important to cultivate that. And, some of the events I go to, the collectors and artists are always in the same, they're always at the same opening. So it's a fun time to get to know the collectors and for them to get to know the artists. Yeah. And I think, number one, again, is put your best foot forward with the artwork, and then just be honest and open about everything. I think collectors appreciate that.
Yeah. That's great advice. There's a lot of ups and downs with being an artist, when it comes to either finances and, you sometimes, some years you sell a lot more than others. And then there's other things like, what are some of the challenges that you may have been facing more recently, as an artist, or maybe it's finding motivation sometimes? Like what are some things that you're facing now that you didn't early on?
Well, I think finding that line of, we talked about this a little bit, of working too much and not having enough time for family and things like that. Finding that fine line of family time and work time. Because when you're self-employed, you're technically working 24 hours a day, whether the idea is in your head or you're talking at dinner about, my wife's an artist too.
Yeah.
So talking shop at dinner is, we don't want little Callie that to be all we do. So carving out those times is really difficult. And especially now, with, newer, bigger shows coming up, it's hard to find time because, it's a lot of paintings. I think I was looking at doing 28 big paintings this year. And to think about that, is overwhelming, because back when I was single and just started out painting, I could paint, 14, 15 hours a day and not think twice about it.
Yeah.
Go to bed at 2 or 3 a.m., get up, and I was fine the next day.
Yeah.
Now I can't do it, because if I stay up till 2 or 3 a.m., Callie's still going to school and she still has to be up at 7. So, so there's no, well, I'll just sleep in tomorrow. That never happens. So
yeah,
I think that's the big thing right now is making work and family, and keeping that separation.
Yeah.
So, as far as the painting itself, I'm always motivated. I have so many ideas in my head. I just don't see ever running out of things to paint. So the problem for me is not having enough time to do all the paintings I want to do. That's really the big thing.
Yeah. Well, that's a good problem to have.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Maybe we'll end with this little idea. If you were able to go back to yourself, 10, 12, 15 years ago, and just give yourself, a quick one or two things that you think would have helped you a lot, what would those things be?
I think I would probably, I'd probably say slow down, and many reasons for that. Really, I think being an artist is not about the destination, because there's no one place to go and end up, because once you end up there, there's another destination. And so I would say embrace that journey. So slow down, see it as a journey.
Yeah.
You're not trying to arrive anywhere, because I think my thought with bringing 3 paintings up to Mountain Gallery is, if I get in this gallery, I've made it. And that's not how it works. That would have been maybe one destination, but then what's next?
Yeah.
And it was really, that type of thinking. It's less about the work and more about the career and those types of goals. And it should always be about the work, and that's going to drive those career goals. So that would be my advice, would be slow down. It's a journey. It's not a destination, and enjoy it and find ways to enjoy it all along the way. So even those early years, if you're struggling as an artist to make it, that's why I was saying, make sure that day job isn't soul crushing, because you want to enjoy it all along.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that would be my advice to a young Dave Santillanes.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's valuable. And I think regardless of where we're at in our journey, it's good to see it as that, cause we run into challenges and struggles. And I think sometimes we get so closed in our little now situation, and it's hard to see the big picture. So I think that's really valuable.
Yeah. And I don't think an art career lends itself to those, more corporate goals. Like, okay, I just need to do this and I'll make it, because there is nothing like that in the art world. There's no blueprint for success. You can't just write a book and say, do these things and you'll make it.
Right.
It's different for every single artist out there.
Yeah. That's one thing I really want to be able to emphasize, especially with this podcast, interviewing you and several other artists that have made it. The story and the journey is different for everybody.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of right ways to do it.
Yeah.
And it's going to look different for you. And hopefully, something from Dave here or from another interview is going to really resonate with these guys and give them a breakthrough, or help them to get a little bit more motivation to keep going. And anyway, I really think it's valuable to see these many perspectives on success.
Yeah, I agree. I love being in this position where I can, start giving back and helping, because I think the resources now are more prevalent than when I started painting.
Absolutely.
There's much, there was much less information about how to make it as an artist, and a lot more about, well, you can be an illustrator, or you could go this route, or you could do this. Not a lot of people were talking about making a living as an artist. And I started seeing guys like Clyde Aspavig who were doing that. And that was inspirational.
Yeah.
So when people say, yeah, there is a way to do it, I think that's huge for young artists.
Yeah, absolutely.
It doesn't even have to be young artists, any artists.
Yeah. So to kind of wrap it up, where if people want to look for you, find you, I know that you actually do some online education. So what's that all about? Tell us about it.
Well, so if you go to my website, davesantillanes.com, and you might have to look up the spelling of that last name.
I'll have a link.
Yeah, that's great. davesantillanes.com. You can go to, I've got an online learning button, and that will actually take you to a site that's through LearnWorlds. But I have a mentorship program and a self-guided workshop program there. The mentorship program, I've been doing it now for about 3 years, and we have about close to 20, 21, 22 artists part of that. And we meet every month, once a month for a couple hours. Sometimes I'll do demos. Sometimes I'll just do a slideshow and talk about some things, like creating atmosphere. How am I doing it? Things like that.
Yeah.
Everyone will paint that month. They'll send me paintings. We'll critique them at this meeting. And then they also have access to about 30 plus videos that I've created that are Some are how-to videos. Some are, like how to paint clouds or things. Some are full demos that I've done. And so it's just a way to add to their learning process. Yeah. It's sort of a workshop extended out, and it's a little bit more personal because we get to know each other, from these month-to-month meetings.
That's awesome.
So that's what I do.
Very cool.
All the information is on my website.
And then if they want to find you on social media, what social media platforms are you on, and what's your handles?
Yep, I'm on Facebook and Instagram, which is still too much for me to keep up with, but those are, I didn't do the LinkedIn. I'm not doing LinkedIn, although I have an account. I just don't keep up with it. So Instagram and Facebook are really it. In Instagram, I'm davesantillanes.art, and Facebook, it's just I think it's Dave Santillanes Art.
Okay.
And Facebook too.
Awesome.
Yep.
Well, thank you so much, Dave, for being with us and imparting your experience, your journey, and a lot of really great tips for anybody who's wanting to learn more, and especially with plein air painting. That's extremely valuable. And anyway, thanks. And
thank you, Mark. Thanks for having me. And it's always fun seeing you out at the shows and things like that. So hopefully we meet up, sooner rather than later.
Okay. All right. Happy painting, Dave.
Thanks, Mark.
Yep. Thank you so much for listening to the Business of Art podcast. We would love to have you join us every week as we interview incredible artists and gain insights from their personal journeys to success. If this has been valuable to you, please subscribe and share it with your other artist friends. We'll see you in the next episode.